A vertical takeoff fighter jet hovers above a concrete pad in Kingston upon Thames. The year is 1981. The pilot rotates the vector thrust nozzles downward. The aircraft descends, steadies, touches down. Applause from the engineers. Photographs for the archives. Nobody says it aloud, but everyone knows. This is the last one built here. The factory that birthed the Hurricane, the Hunter, the Harrier, aircraft that changed warfare itself, will be gone within 18 months. The land is worth more empty than productive. The Hawker Siddeley factory at Kingston occupied 47 acres along the Thames. At its peak in 1943, it employed 4,800 people. They built 23 Hurricanes every single day during the Battle of Britain. The factory never stopped. Night shifts, day shifts, women operating drill presses, men riveting aluminium skin onto wing spars, the smell of hot metal and aviation fuel, the sound of Merlin engines being run up for testing carried across the river to Hampton Court Palace, Henry VIII's hunting ground, now an aircraft production line. By 1981, the site employed 340 people. The main assembly hall, once filled with fuselages in various stages of completion, housed exactly 4 aircraft. Planning permission had been granted for a supermarket, a car park, and residential flats. The company that built the fighter planes that saved Britain would become a Tesco. Thomas Octave Murdoch Sopwith, Tommy to everyone who knew him, started with boats. Born in 1888 into money, the son of a mining engineer who had struck gold in Spain, Tommy learned to sail before he learned to read properly. By 18, he was racing yachts competitively. By 21, he had seen his first aeroplane flight at Brooklands and decided instantly that boats were finished as the future of speed. He bought a Howard Wright Avis monoplane for 630 pounds in 1910, taught himself to fly, crashed it, rebuilt it, crashed it again, got his pilot's license, certificate number 31, after a total of 1 hour and 23 minutes of instruction. In November 1910, he won 4,000 pounds for the longest flight from England to the continent, 169 miles in 3 hours and 40 minutes. He was 22 years old and suddenly famous. He set up the Sopwith Aviation Company in December 1912 with 10,000 pounds of capital, renting a former roller skating rink in Kingston upon Thames. The location was deliberate, flat land near the river, close to London, but outside the expensive central districts with good transport links. The first aircraft they built was the Sopwith Tabloid, designed, legend has it, by Tommy sketching on a tablecloth during dinner. It won the Schneider Trophy in 1914, reaching 86.78 miles per hour. Then came the war. The Sopwith Camel, introduced in 1917, shot down 1,294 enemy aircraft, more than any other Allied fighter. The Sopwith Pup, the Sopwith Triplane, the Sopwith Snipe. Tommy's factory produced 18,000 aircraft during the First World War. He became a knight. He became a millionaire. He was 30 years old. The armistice destroyed him financially. The government canceled every outstanding order instantly. Sopwith Aviation Company had 1.8 million pounds in contracts voided overnight. Tommy owed the Inland Revenue 800,000 pounds in excess profits duty, a wartime tax on companies that had made money from the war effort. He couldn't pay. The company went into voluntary liquidation in September 1920. Tommy walked away from the liquidation proceedings, left the building, walked 300 yards down the road, and registered a new company with his chief engineer, Harry Hawker. H.G. Hawker. Engineering company. Same factory, same workforce, different name. The tax liability stayed with the liquidated entity. Legally questionable, financially brilliant, morally ambiguous. Harry Hawker died in 1921, aged 32, after an emergency appendectomy went catastrophically wrong. Tommy renamed the company Hawker Aircraft Limited. In his honor, the timing was cruel. Harry never saw what they would build next. The 1930s were the company's golden age of design. Sidney Cam, the chief designer, created the Hawker Fury, the Hawker Heart, the Hawker Demon. Biplanes mostly. Elegant and fast, but already obsolete. The Air Ministry wanted something new, a monoplane fighter with 8 machine guns. Cam designed the Hurricane. The prototype flew in November 1935. The Air Ministry ordered 600 immediately. the largest order for a military aircraft in British history at that point. Hawker couldn't build them fast enough. The Kingston factory expanded. A second factory opened in Langley, Buckinghamshire, a third in Canada. Total Hurricane production, 14,583 aircraft. During the Battle of Britain in the summer of 1940, Hurricanes accounted for 60% of all enemy aircraft shot down. The Spitfire got the glory, sleeker, faster, more photogenic. The Hurricane did the work. It was easier to build, easier to repair, easier to fly. Fabric-covered wings meant you could patch them with sailcloth and glue if necessary. Pilots called it forgiving. Engineers called it robust. Tommy called it exactly what was needed. The Kingston factory operated 24 hours a day throughout the war. Women made up 60% of the workforce by 1943. They operated lathes, welded fuselages, assembled instrumentation. The government propaganda films showed them smiling, hair tied back in headscarves, contributing to the war effort. The reality was harder. 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week, £4, 10 shillings in weekly wages. Accidents were frequent. Deaths were not publicized. Tommy Sopwith retired from active management in 1963, age 75. He had been knighted twice, once for aviation, once for yachting. He sold his controlling stake in Hawker Siddeley to institutional investors. He lived until 1989, dying at 101 years old. He saw the Kingston factory close. He saw Hawker become a brand owned by Americans. He saw the last British aircraft carrier launch its last British-built fighter. He never gave interviews about it. Hawker Aircraft merged with Armstrong Siddeley Motors and Armstrong Whitworth Aircraft in 1935 to form Hawker Siddeley Aircraft. On paper, it was a merger. In practice, it was Tommy Sopwith's company absorbing two struggling competitors. The government encouraged it. Consolidation meant fewer companies competing for contracts, more efficient production, better use of resources. The logic was impeccable. The execution destroyed individuality. Armstrong Whitworth brought the Whitley bomber. Armstrong Siddeley brought aircraft engines. Hawker brought everything else: the designers, the factory capacity, the Hurricane. The merged company became Britain's largest aircraft manufacturer. By 1960, Hawker Siddeley employed 134,000 people across 120 sites. It built the Vulcan bomber, the Nimrod maritime patrol aircraft, the Buccaneer strike aircraft, the Harrier jump jet. The Harrier was extraordinary. Vertical takeoff and landing, no runway required. Powered by a single Rolls-Royce Pegasus engine with 4 vectoring nozzles that could rotate from horizontal thrust to vertical thrust in seconds. First flight, 1967. The Americans wanted it. The British military ordered it reluctantly. It was too radical, too expensive, too different from conventional fighters. The engineering was magnificent. The business model was doomed. Each Harrier cost £7.5 million in 1980 prices. The RAF ordered 132. The Royal Navy ordered 57. The U.S. Marine Corps ordered 400, but they built them under license in America. Export orders were limited: Spain, India, Thailand. The total production run was 824 aircraft over 30 years, not enough to sustain a factory. The document that killed British military aviation was 21 pages long, dated April 1957, written by Duncan Sandys, Minister of Defense, titled Defense: Outline of Future Policy. The key sentence appeared on page 8. The era of manned fighter aircraft is drawing to a close. The role of defending British airspace will be taken over by guided missiles. Sandys canceled 23 aircraft programs overnight. The Hawker P-112, one supersonic fighter, canceled. The Avro 730 reconnaissance aircraft, canceled. The Saunders Roe SR-177 rocket fighter, canceled. Thousands of engineers were made redundant. Design offices were closed. Wind tunnels were mothballed. The only program that survived was the English Electric Lightning, and only because it was too far advanced to cancel without complete humiliation. Sandys was wrong. Guided missiles did not replace fighter aircraft, but the damage was permanent. British aircraft companies, already consolidating to survive, now faced a domestic market that had essentially vanished. The government wanted missiles, not planes. The RAF had no budget for new fighters. British companies had two choices: export or die. Hawker Siddeley tried exporting. The Harrier sold modestly. The BAE 146 regional airliner sold better. But the company was competing against American giants, Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, Lockheed, with deeper pockets, larger production runs, and government subsidies disguised as military contracts. The British government gave Hawker Siddeley research grants. The Americans gave their companies billion-dollar fighter orders. The Kingston factory, which had built Hurricanes, Hunters, and Harriers, began building components for American aircraft, tail sections for Boeing, wing parts for Airbus, subcontracting work. The indignity was total. The factory that saved Britain in 1940 was now a parts supplier for foreign companies. In 1977, the British government nationalized the entire aerospace industry. Hawker Siddeley ceased to exist as an independent entity. It became part of British Aerospace, a state-owned corporation that absorbed Hawker Siddeley, British Aircraft Corporation, Scottish Aviation, and half a dozen smaller companies. The logic, again, was consolidation. One national champion instead of multiple competing firms. British Aerospace was a bureaucratic catastrophe. Regional directors who had run independent companies for decades suddenly reported to committees in Whitehall. Design offices that had competed fiercely were now supposed to collaborate. Factories that built different aircraft were now supposed to share resources. The culture clash was immediate and toxic. The Kingston factory, part of the Kingston Brow Division, built Harriers and worked on components for the Tornado fighter. The workforce had shrunk to 2,100 by 1978. The main assembly hall, designed for mass production, operated at 30% capacity. The company tried diversifying: hovercraft components, industrial gas turbines, even fiberglass boats. None of it worked. The fixed costs of maintaining a 47-acre factory designed for building fighter aircraft couldn't be covered by building leisure boats. By 1980, British Aerospace wanted out of Kingston. The site was worth £15 million as real estate. As a factory, it was losing £2 million annually. The Harrier production line could be moved to Dunsfold in Surrey. The component work could be outsourced. The Kingston site could be sold to developers. The Treasury approved the plan in March 1981. The workers fought it. The unions called it vandalism. The local MP called it short-sighted. The aviation press called it inevitable. The factory closed in stages. Final assembly in December 1982. Component manufacturing in March 1983. Demolition beginning in September 1983. The site is called Sopwith Park. A Tesco superstore occupies the southern section where the main assembly hall stood. The northern section is residential, 147 flats in 3-story blocks, sold as luxury riverside apartments. Prices in 2025 start at £485,000 for a one-bedroom unit. The marketing materials mention the rich aviation heritage of the location. They do not mention what was demolished to build them. A small memorial exists, a Hurricane propeller blade mounted on a plinth near the river walkway. The plaque reads, "On this site, Hawker Aircraft Limited designed and built the Hurricane fighter, which played a vital role in the Battle of Britain, 1940. No mention of the Harrier, no mention of the 4,800 people who worked there, no mention of the 60 years of continuous aircraft production. The propeller blade is not original. It was cast in aluminium specifically for the memorial." The Brooklands Museum in Weybridge holds the archives, technical drawings, photographs, company records. A reconstructed Hurricane sits in the main hangar. School groups visit. Aviation enthusiasts volunteer as tour guides. It is respectful, thorough, well-maintained. It is also 15 miles from Kingston. The place where the aircraft were actually built has no museum, no heritage center, no visitor information. The Harrier remains in service with the U.S. Marine Corps. The RAF retired its last Harrier in 2010, scrapping the entire fleet to save money. Some were sold to the Americans for spare parts. Some went to museums. Some were cut up for scrap metal. The most advanced vertical takeoff fighter ever built by Britain, rendered obsolete not by superior technology but by accountancy. Imagine if the Kingston factory had survived. Not impossible, not even particularly difficult. British Aerospace could have consolidated Harrier production there instead of at Dunsfold. The site could have pivoted to civil aviation, regional jets, business aircraft, drones. The 47 acres could have become a technology park focused on aerospace engineering, keeping the skilled workforce intact. Other countries managed it. The Dassault factory at Mérignac in France, building Mirage fighters since 1952, is still operational. The Saab factory at Linköping in Sweden, building Gripen fighters, still employs 3,000 people. The Lockheed Martin factory at Fort Worth, Texas, building F-35 fighters, employs 18,000. These companies maintained continuity. They kept their design offices. They kept their skilled workers. They kept building aircraft. Britain chose differently. Consolidation, nationalization, rationalization. Each decision made perfect sense in isolation. Together, they destroyed an industry. By 1990, Britain had no domestically owned large aircraft manufacturers. British Aerospace merged with Marconi to form BAE Systems. BAE Systems is now 20% owned by American investment funds. It builds components for American aircraft under license. The Kingston factory's closure was one decision among hundreds, but it symbolized the entire trajectory, the birthplace of the hurricane, demolished for a supermarket, the engineering expertise dispersed, the institutional knowledge lost, the skills untransferable. You cannot retrain a man who spent 40 years building fighter jets to do anything else. You retire him early. You give him a pension. You let the knowledge die with him. Thomas Sopwith's legacy is fragmented. His name survives on the Sopwith camel, taught to school children as the iconic First World War fighter. His yacht, Endeavour, has been restored and still races occasionally. His company, Hawker Siddeley, exists as a brand owned by Melrose Industries, an investment firm that buys companies, strips assets, and sells them for profit. The connection to aviation is marketing, not manufacturing. The Hurricane, despite being numerically more important than the Spitfire in the Battle of Britain, remains the forgotten fighter. 15 Hurricanes are still airworthy globally. 63 Spitfires are airworthy. The Spitfire has cultural cachet. The Hurricane has engineering respect. In popular memory, the Spitfire won the war. In reality, the Hurricane did most of the work, then was forgotten because it wasn't beautiful enough. The Kingston factory site is now worth £95 million. The land value increased 633% since 1983. The developers who bought it made substantial profits. The investors who financed them made substantial profits. The pension funds that owned shares in British Aerospace made modest profits. The 2,100 workers who lost their jobs got redundancy packages averaging £4,300 each. Some found work in other industries. Many didn't. The average age of the workforce in 1982 was 47, too old to retrain, too young to retire, too skilled for their skills to matter. Britain builds no large passenger aircraft. Britain builds no military transport aircraft. Britain builds no fighter aircraft under its own design. Britain builds components under license for aircraft designed elsewhere. The F-35 Lightning II, the RAF's current frontline fighter, is built by Lockheed Martin in Texas. British companies supply 15% of the components. The aircraft is named after the English Electric Lightning, the last British-designed fighter that entered service. The name is heritage. The aircraft is American. The Harrier design was sold to Boeing in 1996. The intellectual property, the technical drawings, the manufacturing data, all transferred to America. Boeing built an improved version called the AV-8, B Harrier II. It is still in service. The British original is in museums. A woman walks along the Thames Path near Kingston. She is 73. Her father worked at the Hawker factory for 34 years. He was an electrical fitter, installing instrumentation panels in Hurricane cockpits during the war, in Hunter cockpits in the 1950s, in Harrier cockpits in the 1970s. He died in 1987, 4 years after the factory closed. She asked him once what it was like, building those aircraft. He said it was just a job. She didn't believe him. He never elaborated. She stops at the memorial, the Hurricane propeller blade. She touches it. The metal is cold. Behind her, a Tesco lorry reverses into the loading bay. In front of her, the Thames flows towards London. Somewhere upstream, Henry VIII's palace still stands. tourists photographing the Tudor gardens. Somewhere downstream, the Thames barrier protects London from flooding. The river connects them all. The factory is gone. She cannot remember if her father ever spoke about Tommy Sopwith. Probably not. Workers didn't meet the founder. They clocked in, built aircraft, clocked out. The factory employed 4,800 people at peak. But how many could name the company's history? How many knew they were building in the same hall where Sopwith camels were assembled? How many cared? The memorial plaque does not include the date the factory closed. It does not include the number of redundancies. It does not include what happened to the workforce. It celebrates the hurricane as if the factory's entire 60-year existence could be reduced to one aircraft built during one war. The rest is absence. What happens to institutional knowledge when the institution is demolished? It disperses. The senior engineers took early retirement. The technical drawings went to archives. The machine tools were sold to other factories. The skills, the fingertip knowledge of how aluminium behaves under stress, how to rivet a wing spar so it flexes without fracturing, how to diagnose an engine problem from the sound of its run-up, those skills retired with the men who held them. By 1990, nobody in Britain under the age of 45 knew how to build a fighter aircraft from scratch. The generation that did was leaving the workforce. The generation after them had never learned. The woman walks on. The memorial is behind her now. Ahead, the luxury apartments, lights in the windows, residents returning from work, unaware that they live on the ground where hurricanes were built. Why would they know? The past is not written on buildings. The past is written in archives, accessed by researchers, read by nobody. The site is real estate now. The history is heritage, safely contained in museums 15 miles away, where it cannot interfere with property values. Britain lost its aircraft industry the way a man loses his hearing, gradually, imperceptibly, until one day he realizes the sounds he remembers are no longer there. The decision to close Kingston was rational. The decision to consolidate British aerospace was rational. The decision to nationalize the industry was rational. Rationality accumulated, destroyed what sentiment might have saved. The factory is gone. The propeller blade remains cold and abstract, a memorial to something the nation forgot how to value until it no longer existed to be valued.